Hey folks, Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and I am doing yet another installment of the freelancing Q&A series that we do. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a whole playlist that you can check out if this stuff is interesting. So the question I have today is, how do you win? Wait, let me double check. Oh yeah, just how do you win long-term clients? And that's an interesting one. I kind of like this subject. The thing that I want to start out by saying, though, is kind of a word of caution. So I can think of two subtly but crucially different things that we could be talking about here if you're asking about winning long-term clients. One would be, how do I win long-term clients in the sense that these are folks that I do business with over and over again, and we have a great relationship, and there is kind of a long-standing professional relationship. And then there could also be the concern of staff augmentation, which is, how do I win a long-term client in the sense of, I just want to go out and find somebody that's going to pseudo employ me as a freelancer for the next 5 years. The former, winning long-term business, people that come to you over and over again for help or that you have long-standing relationships with in the business sense, is good. I would argue that the latter, being a staff augmentation, is not so good. It is not something I would be looking to do if I were going off on my own as a freelancer. So let me first talk about why that is, and then move into talking more about the former kind, the good business relationship over the years, like what that looks like, why you would want it, and then how to achieve it. Because even, so the question is, how do I win long-term clients? And the how actually depends a lot on which of these two things that you want to pursue. So let's talk first about staff augmentation. You are working for the man, working 9 to 5 as a salaried employee, and you decide you want to go off on your own and become a freelancer. Great. So you resign and you go out and you look to find clients. And I think, I can throw this up on YouTube. I think I've actually done a video about how to win a first client. So maybe you've done that. You've turned your former employer into your first client or something like that, or you've lined up, some kind of engagement. Now, if you have lined up a single client, or maybe you've never lined up a client before, winning business, doing sales, etc., can seem sort of scary and awkward. You aren't good at it. You've never, most likely, if you're watching this, done sales before. So there can be this feeling of, oh, thank God I got some business. I don't want to repeat that experience again. I want this client engagement to last as long as it possibly can. It's very understandable. Furthermore, there is a tendency in this frame of mind when you first hung out your shingle, maybe you go on Upwork, and you're going to encounter a lot of things that feel more like interviews than sales conversations. Your business winning as a freelancer, especially in the early going, might start to feel a lot like the job search process, interviewing for jobs. And that is, an atrocious process that, in my opinion, shouldn't exist. I think job interviews personally are a stupid construct. But it's certainly not fun. And when you're an employee, you actively seek to minimize the amount of time you spend doing job interviews. You don't want to do that all that often. So it's easy to carry that into the freelance world. And what this leads to is a natural incentive for you to go, and instead of interviewing for jobs, maybe you go to like a brokerage like Robert Half, or you go to Upwork or something, and you really try to minimize the pain of the whole process of finding work. And then it can easily lead to a situation where you come on as a contractor with some company who, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like hiring a full-time employee, so they hire a contractor instead. But you can find yourself, especially those of you doing application development, custom app dev, in a role that looks an awful lot like employment. So you are a freelancer, but you're a freelancer who drives out to the client site and writes code 40 hours a week for that client, and takes holidays when their staff takes holidays, and seems like an employee in every way except the paperwork. That is what is known as staff augmentation. And you can earn a living doing this. It is generally going to be higher paying than salaried employment. But on the flip side, it's you are going to be probably responsible for your own benefits and a whole lot of other stuff. But aside from those distinctions, it's basically the same thing. So I guess my question for you is, why would you hang out your shingle and go freelance and try to go into business for yourself if you're just going to turn around and simulate employment? the arrangement that you are talking about, or that I'm talking about, that staff augmentation, has all the downsides of employment. You have only one single client, so if they fire you, you're at square one. You have a boss because you're going to be reporting to somebody at the client. Pretty much in every way, you are going to resemble an employee. I mean, I guess on your LinkedIn or on your resume, you can technically say that you worked for yourself, but eh. So, I mean, you're getting a bit of my editorial take here on this arrangement and why I wouldn't do it. I don't really understand the upside of this versus just working at a company where you're going to get their health insurance and all that. But the crucial thing here is the person asking this question might be wondering, like, how do I win long-term clients, in the sense that I'm looking for that engagement. And if you want that style of engagement, I wouldn't, but if you want it, it's fairly easy to do. Just declare yourself a contractor or a freelancer, and then go to organizations like a Robert Half, go to staffing companies that specialize in placement of long-term staff augmentation contractors, and boom, you know, you go on board at Company Inc., and then it's just like having a job. So you go to Company Inc., XYZ Inc., and they interview you, and then you onboard, and you just work there until they get tired of you, or vice versa, and that's how you win long-term clients in this paradigm. But my thinking is that you're probably going off on your own because you want something different than salaried employment. And so if you go down this fairly easy to go down route, you're just going to recreate salaried employment. So this is why I wouldn't do it. And if you go this route, you're really not winning a long-term client. You're winning a boss. You're winning an employer. So, end of rant here, but I do think this is an important distinction, because when you set aside this idea of how do I go find a company that's going to pay me forever to do miscellaneous tasks on into infinity, and you look at winning long-term business with engagements that are smaller in scope, that aren't open-ended, that's where the question really gets interesting. So let's break away. Let's say you've gone off on your own and you're doing custom application development, and maybe you've even had a turn or two of this sort of open-ended staff augmentation, and you want to get away from it. I can think of somebody that's been in Hit Subscribe, Author Pool, and we've had a relationship for a very long time, and started doing kind of like custom app dev stuff, and started to specialize in like legacy code remediation and that type of thing. So maybe gradually you start to have more of a specialty. And instead of taking on these just open-ended gigs where you're doing custom work forever, maybe you're doing something like offering to go in, for a month or two, fixed period, and help companies deal with legacy code bases. Or maybe you get more into doing more fixed duration, fixed scope kind of website builds, or I don't know, maybe you help mobile development shops like set up a unit testing suite. You start doing something, and the thing that you're doing or specializing in is reduced in scope. Miscellaneous staff augmentation work is just open-ended custom scope. You go and you just do tasks that they tell you to do ad infinitum. Once you start to specialize and have something to your offering, there are things you will do and things you won't do. So if you're remediating legacy code, that's what you do. You don't then stay on and just write web applications indefinitely. If you're coming in to set up a mobile unit testing suite for a company, you go and you set up that suite. You don't stick around forever banging out features and crossing them off in Jira. So you start to have something that is narrower and more fixed in scope. Usually it's time boxed. It might be open-ended and just in fewer hours per week or something like that, but you're doing something that has boundaries in a way that you haven't before. Now, when you start doing that, if you're just doing staff augmentation, by contrast, you can have the same client for 40 hours a week for 12 months, 24 months, 120 months, however long it goes on. If you're fixing your scope, if it's narrower, now you suddenly can't just have one client and call it a year. You might need to, if you're doing these website builds that take a month, you're going to need 12 clients to have a good year. If you're doing something that takes up, a fraction of your week, you're going to need whatever rounds out that fraction. So if it takes an eighth of your week, you need 8 of those. So you're going to start to need to have multiple clients throughout a calendar year. Now, one of the best ways, one of the easiest ways to win business is to win repeat business. Meaning, if you have done some work with somebody in the past, say you've done work, some individual, some person brought you in to do some work for their company. That person leaves the company and then they go to a new company. One of the easiest ways to do business, if that person liked you and they need whatever you did at the old company, they'll give you a call to do whatever that thing is at the new company. Likewise, if it's something that comes up from time to time, the examples I've thrown out, like website builds and legacy remediation, are more unique situations. But I don't know. Let's say that you're talking about somebody at an enterprise, and they have a lot of different legacy applications. Maybe they're remediating them one by one, so they help you deal with one, and they sorry, banged my ring on my glass desk. They bring you in to do the first remediation, then everybody needs to take a deep collective organizational breath because that was awful. But then 6 months later, they have another one they want to tackle, so they reach out to you again. Now we're getting into something that's crucial when it comes to running a business. Number one, easiest sale to make is to a previously satisfied customer or somebody with whom you already have some kind of relationship, whether it's an upsell or a repeat engagement. So the idea here is going out and winning new business, like cold emailing people, making an introduction, convincing them to work with you, doing a sale. That's hard compared to just working with somebody who's like, oh, you did this for me before and it was great, let's do it again. That's easy. So we're getting into the motivation of why you would want to win long-term clients. And again, by long-term clients, I mean either people or organizations that are doing business with you on an ongoing basis, or else they're doing serial business with you. They're calling you once every 6 months or once a year or whatever the case may be. But those are the things that we're talking about. So ideally, if you are doing some kind of service, you would probably want to come up with ways to have repeat business. So if you're doing website builds, maybe you schedule out like a periodic facelift of the website. People like their websites to look different periodically. So you do a build and then say, hey, we should circle back in a year to see if you need updates. We should circle back in 2 years to see if X, and then by 5 years, you're going to want to overhaul and rebuild it. So let's talk then. Likewise, if you're doing legacy code remediation, you might want to think about scheduling periodic check-ins to make sure they're not repeating the sins of the past or letting their platform that they're building on get out of date. So you should actively brainstorm ways to re-engage clients that were satisfied with you in the past. And that is one great way to win long-term business, is to contrive of ways that they can keep doing business with you, but not ways that are just get in there and do miscellaneous tasks and cross off JIRAs. It has to be something that you can offer within the scope of your business that's coherent and doesn't just like suck you into pseudo employment. So I think what I want to talk through here is now that this is kind of established, like, first of all, you need to think of a way to give people to do business with you again and again, because repeat or recurring business is kind of the lifeblood of an organization. If you don't give customers ways to keep doing business with you, you're kind of playing on hard mode. So do that first. And then once you have that, if you've kind of worked out ways that people can give you ongoing recurring business, then it's a question of how do you conduct yourself in a way that encourages them to want to do that. And let me, I guess, dive in with some concrete tips there. So the first thing I've noted here that, in my experience is crucial. Oh, and I should pause with a brief aside to say, like, this has, in my own travels, come up when I was doing management consulting. I would form a lot of good relationships. And so typically companies aren't in need of like management consulting over and over again in specific circumstances. But what would happen is I would get repeat calls from executives or people in business who might be transferring within an organization or who might be starting a new project or program or something. And then they would think to give me a call, or they would leave and they would go to a new company and give me a call to help them, assess their situation, things like that. So I have experience winning repeat business with a very customized consulting practice. And then on the flip side, building Hit Subscribe, which started out as pure productized service. We're growing into something more than that now. That's kind of an interesting one because creating or consuming content is a very episodic thing. We've scaled well beyond me, so we can juggle, 50 clients at once. But some of the principles here apply. Like, how do we create customers that come to us for content and like content strategy and such, and then they want to stay engaged with us and keep engaging with us. Or actually, the way we win most of our business these days is somebody leaves a company, goes to another company, and then brings us along with them. So I do have some experience there, and I'm going to be talking for the rest of this and giving you tips from that kind of fount of experience, if you will, that I like to think is good because we do have an awful lot of repeat business. The first thing I will say is foundational. Put their interests first, because if you, it's easy, especially in the freelance world, if you go into freelance communities, I talk about this a lot, but where you get this sort of like peeing match of like, here's my rate. And I would never get on a discovery call unless, they were paying because my time is valuable. Like there is this protesting too much that goes in with new productized service business, new freelancers, where you're going out of your way to turn things into a zero-sum game with your clients. Don't do that. Get on those discovery calls, help people. And in fact, if you get on a discovery call with somebody who is, coming to you for legacy help or help with a legacy application, for instance, and you start walking them through it and you form the conclusion, why are you trying to rescue this app? You could just easily replicate this with like Airtable and, a couple of customizations. You shouldn't even have this app in the first place. You're talking yourself out of business. If they're coming to you because they have this horrible old thing running on some platform, it is in your interests financially to say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll help you get this thing modernized. If you go against that and say like, look, I'm talking myself out of business here, but you don't need a legacy modernization. What you need to do is pull the plug on that thing and just recreate it in Airtable and you'll be fine. Put their interests first, because you have just made a potential customer for life by giving them that advice. Now, it won't pay off. It's not going to put any zeros in your bank account in the short term. You're talking yourself out of some revenue. But in the long term, that person is going to remember that you, at a loss short term to yourself, gave them solid, good advice and said, hey, just, if it comes to it and you have another situation that's relevant, just remember me. Well, if they ever have that situation again, they're absolutely going to call you and they're going to give you money, and they're probably going to give you more money than was on the table the first time. So it is a long game and a long play, but always, always, always have the best interest of these clients and prospects at heart. That will start to, on a long timeline, pay back. Another thing that I'll say when it comes to winning long-term business is have predictable repeat processes. And policies. And I don't mean that you should go invent a bunch of BS to make it seem like you've been in business longer than you have. I'm talking about basic things, at least to start with. So if you are a freelancer and you're doing, these legacy remediations or whatever, it might just be a matter of policies, such as no prospect or customer should ever wait more than a day to hear back from me. I might not get back to you right away. I'm not a synchronous emailer, but you will never go longer than a day without hearing from me, even if it's just to say, hey, I need more time to process your request here. Simple things like that. It can be creating a predictable onboarding experience. Here are the things I need. If you have a contract, here are the things I'm going to mark up. So just documenting the things that happen over and over again in the course of an engagement and having a good explanation for them, and then delivering on that with the clients. So you should always be, creating predictable experiences. The clients should have a sense of what it's like to deal with you, and you should repeat that every time so they can count on you. I think it was in the book, The E-Myth Revisited. The author of that book talked about a really interesting experience where, if memory serves, I'm going from memory from a few years ago reading this, but it was something like that he went to a barber shop and he had a wonderful experience. So he went in and sat down and they actually brewed him a cup of coffee while the hair cutter finished up with the previous person, and then asked him a certain set of questions. And he loved the experience. He raved about it to people, and got a great haircut. Next time he went back, there was no cup of coffee. The waiting procedure was somewhat different. Still got a really good haircut, but he cited that he never went back to that place. And it's because he felt duped. He talked up this really awesome one-off process that they did, and then it didn't turn out to be the way they actually did business. It was just a thing that happened one time. And he said how counterintuitively, I actually had a pretty good experience both times, but the lack of predictability and consistency, So it can be the same thing with you in your practice. If you give somebody great results on a legacy remediation the first time, and then you write up this wonderful white paper as kind of just a random extra that you decided to throw in, and then the second time you're too busy, so you don't do the white paper, that client may have had actually a pretty good experience both times, but surprisingly not want to deal with you again because they don't know what they're going to get from you. Predictability is huge, and that is huge for winning repeat business. Another thing that I would suggest is being results focused. One thing that makes it really easy to just kind of fade into the mix of commodified labor is to always be focused on, am I going to get paid for this? And like, here are my tasks. Here's a giant punch list of things that I did so that I was busy and that's why you should pay me and blah, blah, blah. If you flip that around and during your discovery, you focus on the results that the client is going for. What kind of transformation do they want from like previous state to current state or desired state? What, pain do they have that they're very much looking to have alleviated, et cetera? Focus on that in your discovery and always keep that top of mind during the course of your engagement, and then circle back, closing the loop on whatever you're doing to say, all right, here's how we've addressed that thing. If you stay focused like that, it ensures that you always have the client's goals in mind, and that tends to create a very memorable experience for them. They know that you are partnering with them and going to bat for them in whatever it is that they do. It kind of folds in with the predictability one, but I've got a note here to talk about good communication. I'd mentioned kind of a conceptual SLA for emails, but it goes beyond that. It isn't just kind of the basics of like be responsive. Good communication means threading the needle between being overly verbose and being overly terse, creating just the right amount of information for the client to consume. It can mean things that I historically wasn't good at, but have tried to improve over the years, which is maybe you send an email that says, here are the quick hitter points in case you're really busy, and then here's some context where I explain more below. So figuring out how not just to communicate and be responsible and diligent, but communicate in a way that is maximally beneficial for the client and takes into account whether they're busy, whether there's somebody that likes a ton of detail or really wants you to keep it simple. So get good at communicating in the ways that your clients like to receive communications. And then I guess, I would say to kind of dovetail in with the results one again, close the loop on the outcomes that you're trying to deliver for good or bad. So I was kind of saying be results focused, make sure you do that throughout and then come back around and focus on the outcome. But that isn't just to upsell or sell. Even if you came up short, then it's important to kind of retrospect on that either for yourself or for the client and, be honest about how things went. And then maybe next time you're adjusting how you set expectations or what have you. But no matter what, you want to be closing the loop on here's what we tried to do, here's what happened, here was the results. And that might sound like you're teeing yourself up for some serious failure, but you're really not. So like if, for instance, something that came up was recently with It Subscribe, somebody was asking, do you think we could get to I don't want to use their actual figure, but let's say somebody came and said, we have this amount of traffic. We want to get to 300,000 visitors a month to our site by the end of the year. What do you think? And my take on this was, I think that's a pretty aggressive goal. I don't think that we are going to get there, but we could try. Now, if in the end we are at 250,000 visitors a month and it's December 30th and we're having a conversation, I feel pretty comfortable saying, yeah, we took a shot at it. This was always an aggressive goal. We didn't get there. Maybe next time we shoot lower, we do these things differently. And that could even be true if I had said, yeah, 300,000 visitors, no problem. Now, if it's December 30th and we haven't gotten there, I have to own that a little bit more and say, look, here's why I thought that. Here's what happened. Here's where I was wrong. So, here's how we proceed. And if it is that type of thing that you're teeing up, the client may be unhappy with the outcome. They may even want a discount or something like that, but they won't consider you to be a horrible failure, especially if you're not necessarily guaranteeing or promising an outcome, or if you do guarantee or promise an outcome, but you have the sort of escape valve for what happens if we don't achieve this, which might be a discount or money back or whatever the case may be. But the important thing here is take that outcome focus and close the loop on it, whether for good or for bad. Because here's what's going to happen. That might sound scary, but let's say, we're talking about the 300,000 a month visitor threshold that I'm looking to help with. If I promise that and we fail to deliver on it, I've learned a pretty valuable lesson. I should promise less, or I should get better at delivery, or what have you. I am aligning my incentives with the client. So next time I make a similar kind of promise like that, I am going to, deliver, or I'm going to get better at making the right promise. And that sort of partnership with your clients is what wins you long-term clients. It is that skin in the game together, that owning it if you don't deliver, that, not dancing and crowing too much if you do deliver and just kind of acting like you've been there before. But that partnership together, the investment in the client's goals and desired outcomes and walking that path together is absolutely what wins you that long-term business. And you would be surprised how much this makes you stand a head and shoulders above anybody else that you might be theoretically competing with. Because most people are just going to do their punch list of hourly things. They're just going to be thinking about what they want to do. They're going to be in this zero-sum game with the client. If you take a different approach that is more client-focused and more thoughtful and predictable and all the good things, you are going to win over long-term business because it's just going to be such a good experience compared to everybody else out there. So hopefully that all makes sense and is helpful to some of you, and I will catch you next time.